Welcome to Kingdomize, the podcast, where we discuss how to see our lives and our world through a kingdom lens, how to infuse kingdom culture into our families, our workplaces, and our cities, as we all participate in the dream of Jesus to see his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Hey, welcome back to Kingdomize Global. It's a wonderful day in the middle of the winter in the cold Canadian North. that's the thing we can do with that, Bruce, the thing that can touch our hearts is that the Leafs will play again soon and win, and then eventually in April, May, June, be out of the playoffs, and it'll be...
I'm not going down that road. We're talking about safe and courageous versus safe versus courageous. So.
Oh, that was so good of you. That was so good of you to bring it right back into our tune today. Well, then, because you brought it up, we are talking about kingdom culture today. We are talking about, in this new series we've started, we're talking about kingdom zeal. We are talking about culture. We are talking about the difference between living safe and living courageous. And so, just to set this up a bit more, in this series, we're looking at Isaiah 9, specifically verse 6 and 7. I'm not going to read it. Hopefully you've memorized it already. Not just you, Bruce, but everyone that's listening. But we're specifically talking about the four elements of the kingdom that we see there, that there's a king who's building a country that's expanding. There's a culture to this kingdom, and then there's citizens that expand the kingdom working with the king. And so today, in your role, Bruce, for not just today, but twice in this series, your role is to talk to us about kingdom culture. What is it? What are you going to talk about? And then what are you going to talk about today?
We're going to look over the next number of weeks at two significant areas of kingdom culture. Today, we're going to look at this sort of idea of the safe path as opposed to the courageous path. And next time when we talk about culture, we're going to talk about this tension between law and grace, God's holiness, but also his desire to redeem. And so this legal, moral, relational, restorative tension. So that's coming up next. But today we're going to talk about just the nature of God's kingdom. And not only that, but how we position ourselves in that kingdom. To understand as leaders, as those who are called to participate with God in his redemptive mission. How do we fit? Where do we fit? And what should we be carrying the ethos of that kingdom?
I know you're a big C.S. Lewis fan. And so when we start talking about being safe, like I always think of, when I think of this with you, I think about Aslan. Like, is he safe? Bruce, is he safe?
Yeah. Well, that actually, you know what? I had that down as a note. That really, the nature of God is to be good, simply,
right.
Simply put, but not safe. And that line from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when they ask about Aslan, he's a lion, right? He's a lion, and the kids all go, "Well, he's a lion. Is he safe?" And the beaver, of course, he's not safe. He's a lion, but he's good.
Yeah,
but he's good, and we're going to kind of run down that path.
Yeah. Well, let's do that then, because you clearly establishing who God is will be really important for us. Establishing who he is, because if we are to live a risky, kind of courageous life, we better know who we're doing it with and whether it's a good idea or not, right? So let's talk a bit about that, the nature of God.
Okay, well, I'm going to start by saying that I think we would all agree that God's kingdom is kind of counterintuitive, right? There are things about it that don't necessarily make sense compared to what we would kind of understand as kind of worldly wisdom or secular wisdom. And so we start from that position of thinking, okay, well, in general, in life, we want control, right? Most of us as leaders, we like to control things. And Jesus was very clear, and we're going to dive deeper into one of his parables in a few minutes, but that our role is to be stewards of this mission, stewards of the grace that God has given us. And so we in order to do that, we really need to have a deep understanding, who are we stewards for?
Yeah.
Who's the king of the kingdom that we're going to be unpacking, and others will be doing that in our series. But understanding who the king of the kingdom is, who is this God that we are going to be serving, and that we've been given resources to steward. There's a great quote I love. It's from an old German book on theology. It's actually no one really knows who wrote this, but I love this quote. It says, "And thus God loveth not himself as himself, but as goodness. And if there were aught better, he would love that, and not himself." And so God understands himself not as power, not as God as we might think, but as goodness, and therefore loves himself. And so when we think of God, I'm going to quickly ramble through some attributes of God that hopefully will cause us to sort of be humbled a bit in his presence, and know who we are in relation to who God is. Because if we as we study the scriptures, we see that the ultimate law that we live by is self-abandonment. We hear there's lots of phrases that we see in the Bible, about the seed dies to live. We cast our bread on the water. In order to gain life, we lose it. The greatest among you will be the greatest servant. There's a counterintuitiveness to this kingdom. And so when we think of that, in order to fully grasp how we do that, how we live that out, we need to grasp who our king is. And so real quickly, let's just have a quick look at this generous, giving God who is infinite. So he's without limitations. We can give you scripture. We don't have time to go through all the scriptures today, but 1 Timothy 6:16, you can look that up. He's self-existent. He depends on nothing and depends on no one. Right? So these are kind of theological themes, but they're incredibly important for us to grasp. He's immutable. He's always the same. He's always consistent. He never varies. He doesn't come in hot one day and cold. Like he's immutable. He's omnipotent, which means simply he possesses all power. He's all powerful. He's omnipresent. So he's always with us in every moment. So he's omnipresent, both meaning in the past, all times and all places, but all places at all times. So future and past don't really relate to God as they do to us. Right? He's good, and he's always good. But as we've already said, he's not safe in the sense that we like to think of safe. Right?
Yeah.
Don't hurt me. Nothing goes wrong. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to get injured. I don't want any risk. That's not the God we serve, right? And he is love. And these all come from scripture, right? God is love.
Yeah.
So the bottom line in all this is that he's God and we're not.
Yeah.
There's a omnipotent, omniscient, all powerful God, and it's not me. It's not you. Right. And so if I can,
there's a king and I'm not him.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, and we live in a time, and I say this not to get into a big debate, but a good portion of the message of the Christian church, in particular in the last number of years, is that somehow it exists to serve our needs. Right? It's God sort of exists to serve us and to provide us with what we need. And God's gracious and loving, and he does that. He provides, but he provides for us in order that we can serve him and serve his purposes and serve his mission. And so he doesn't exist to serve us. We exist to serve him, to have relationship with him, to grow towards him. And so if we can get that sorted out, then we can really have a revelation of how we fit into God's redemptive mission.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because as we were preparing for this series and we're talking about all these contrasts, like, is he safe, or you play safe, or you courageous? We talked about the difference between, are we observers in the kingdom or participants? Is God serving us, or do we serve him? And there's a little bit of truth in all of it, because Jesus did come to serve and seek and save that was lost, but ultimately we are to serve, right? And so when you talk about this point, it's really good. Is that yeah, God wants you to be safe, but it's better if you're courageous. He so and his nature does that. And I was thinking as you were going through this list, we used to talk about, there's an A.W. Tozer quote that I can't remember because I reworded it. It's like, and the way I say it is, the most important thing about us is what we think about when we think about God, right? So
Yeah.
because if that foundation isn't set right, everything else is going to go haywire. So I love that.
Totally.
So in order for us to be courageous, again, that foundational piece. And then I would say the second most important thing is what we believe about ourselves and how we live that. And that's where you're heading with the whole servant versus owner versus steward, right?
Yeah, totally. And so, those quotes are actually really relevant because we've started off trying to at least give a pretty awesome picture of this God that we serve, who is not made of the same stuff we are.
Yeah.
And so if we can know that to some degree and have an ongoing and deepening revelation of who God is, then we can know ourselves better and know what God desires of us on a higher level. And so one of the main themes that comes through in Scripture, and particularly in the Gospels, as Jesus reveals his Father, is our role as stewards. The stewards it's not a real common word used today, and most people would have a sense of, okay, what does that mean? What is a steward? But I think it's really interesting if we can compare the difference between stewardship and ownership, right? Because we naturally fall into ownership. We kind of naturally assume that the things we have are ours. It's like, I'm going to give God something. Well, nice try, Like everything we have is his. Everything we have, he's given us. Everything that we possess comes to us from the Father of heavenly lights, right? As James tells us. So there's one of the most interesting parables for me that Jesus told was the parable of the servants who were entrusted with resources. One's given 5 bags of gold, one's given 2, one's given 1. And we don't have time to really dive deeply, but it strikes me, that parable strikes me because it clearly shows the difference between an owner and a steward. There's an accounting that the master seeks after he gives resources to the servants. He's like, okay, you're going to manage my stuff, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask for an accounting. And the story that the one with 5 doubles, the one with 2 doubles, the one with 1 goes and hides it. He's afraid, right? He wants to be safe. Doesn't want to risk losing it. So he buries it in the ground. He didn't get a good report card.
Yeah.
So there's 4 or 5 real strong things that come out of that for me. And I'm just going to go through these, and then we can wrap it up at the end. But the reality is that if I'm an owner, in essence, I serve my possessions. If the essence of what I understand myself to be is I own stuff, I manage stuff that's mine, then I serve the stuff I own. But the real difference here is that stewards serve masters. They serve someone, and in this case, they serve the master. Obviously, is God, and so I don't want to serve stuff, whether that stuff is physical, goods and possessions and land and money and whatever. I want to serve the master.
Yeah.
And so my point in all this, and I'll just back up for a second, is that I think stewards can be more courageous than owners. because the limitation in the owner's life, it's limited to his possessions, his stuff, the things he has control over. And so the first thing here is obviously owners serve possessions, stewards serve masters.
Right.
We want to serve a master, not possessions. Owners answer the call of their possessions. Stewards answer the call of their masters. And so I want to answer to, that master that we unpacked earlier, that omnipotent, omniscient, immutable master, not the volatility of possessions here today and gone tomorrow. So owners answer the call of their possessions. Stewards answer the call of their masters. Owners seek to be blessed by their possessions. Stewards seek to be blessed by their master and bless others with their master's possessions.
Right.
And so again, I'm trying to draw this deep difference between ownership and stewardship, because people can start processing this in whatever way they want, thinking about themselves or others or whatever, about the materialism that all of us are, especially in our Western world, is so prevalent, and so much focus and time is spent in accumulating stuff, getting stuff, preparing for this, for retire, all these things that occupy so much room in our head. This is one of the reasons why a steward, I believe, can be more courageous than an owner, because their head's not filled with all of this stuff about how do I manage it, how do I keep it, how do I extend it, how do I build it up, right? Build the bigger barns and that. So owners seek to be blessed by their possessions. Stewards seek to be blessed by their masters and bless others with their master's possessions. Owners are inflexible because they can suffer loss, right? They can lose what they believe they own. Right. As a steward, I can be flexible because I obey my master, not my possessions. And if my master says, risk this, do this, go out and put, do something I might think is risky, but if my master tells me to do it, I obey him, not my possessions, his goals, his objectives, and his direction. Yeah. And so again, as a steward, I'm responsible to obey my master, to serve him well, and to steward his resources for his goals and his purposes, not my own.
Yeah. Let's hit that just for a minute, Bruce, because when you've done this before, we've had this chat before, you hit on the discussion of risk, right? And I think that point there really helps us with that. So it's not just arbitrary risk. I'm going to go risk now because there's a connection between the master's goals and objectives and direction, right? Is that right?
Yeah, totally. And so the greater revelation I have of who my master is and what he desires to do and see happen, the greater I can serve his plans and purposes and objectives.
Yeah.
So
and understanding that
it is.
Sorry, and understanding that he wants us to risk, right? To expand the kingdom, we'll take risk. Anytime something grows, there's a risk, right?
Yeah. And that's why, in the kingdom context that we're obviously unpacking, risk is not something to be avoided. Obviously we don't make foolish, take foolish risks. We take wise, kind of in the kingdom context, you take wise risks.
Yeah.
things that make sense because we're obeying our master who's not risk adverse. God is not risk adverse.
Yeah, he's probably riskier than we are. Right?
Well, without question. So, I want to get to the part that for me is the most exciting as someone who's trying to understand my role as a steward.
Yeah.
And the parable, the servants that took what they got, their master had given them, and put it to work, served their master well in his absence, comes out and they say, hey, you gave me 5, here's another 5. You gave me 2. Here's another 2. We know the outcome for the one who hid his talent, and hid his bag of gold, and didn't do anything with it. But I love the response of the master to the faithful stewards.
Yeah.
You've been faithful. Let me just read it. His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things." And this line is the most significant. Come and share your master's happiness.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things in those 2 little phrases there. One, the steward, because he served well, didn't mean he became an owner. It meant that his master gave him more to be in charge of.
Yeah.
More things to steward. His stewardship grew. And so it's not like we serve to get. We serve our master because we love our master and we want to be faithful to his purposes. And our reward for serving well is 2. One, we get to steward more things.
Yeah.
But the part that's the most significant for me is that we get to enter into our master's happiness.
Yeah.
For me, Jesus is saying, when I steward, when I take the position of a steward and I serve well, I get to move into a place in relationship with my master of intimacy, of sharing deeply the master's plans and purposes. And there is joy in that you can never know simply through ownership.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that invitation to come and share your master's happiness, your master's joy, to be intimate with your master in that regard, to me is a powerful, powerful incentive to continue to push down this thing inside all of us that wants to control and own and, possess, and to position ourselves as stewards of our master's resources and steward them well. Because the reward is we get more to do, but the real reward is that we get intimacy and joy and and love this. We get to know the joy of the master, not just see it, but know it, right? It's deeply intimate.
The reward for doing something well is to get more to do, more responsibility, which again is that counterintuitive kingdom, right? It's like, no, I don't want more to do. It's like, no.
I want to retire.
It reminded me when you're talking about John 15, right? Where God's going to prune, and like, we don't want the pruning. It's like, I want you to be more faithful and more fruitful. And so these things you think are painful are allowing you to get more of the kingdom and grow more of the kingdom, both in you personally, but then around you. Yeah, really good. Well, buddy, this has been amazing, and we're almost out of time. Why don't you wrap this up? What's the way you want to wrap this up today to talk about this part of kingdom culture, being courageous, risking? How do you want to wrap that up?
I'll come back to this idea that we live in a society that wants to bubble wrap everything, right? Including kids. We have insurance for everything imaginable. We have massive spend massive amounts of time and energy and to create ways to stop someone from getting our stuff. Locks and like all the stuff that we do to protect our stuff. There's an enormous amount of energy expended that's not aligned with God's plan and purpose. And I'm not saying don't lock your door. I'm just saying let's get real about who we are, who God is, and our calling, and recognize that He doesn't call us into safety.
Yeah.
In the typical sense of safety. He calls us to invest and take risks for Him. And the promise is that nothing bad's going to happen. The promise is that we get to actually know God better.
Yeah.
And I wish I had time to go deeply into this, because we could go to Philippians chapter 2, where Jesus who risked the ultimate risk, right, of becoming nothing and offering himself, even death on the cross.
Right.
And anyway, that's maybe another session. But I think there's a deep battle that goes on, particularly in our Western context. This idea of safety first. Don't take risks. Don't put yourself out there. Don't get yourself in a vulnerable position, which is absolutely not supported by the Gospels.
Yeah.
Not supported by Jesus. And so I want to encourage people to understand that in order for us to push back against this idea of always taking the safe way, that's the low ground. In Revelation, it talks about, you're neither hot or cold.
Yeah.
So I'm going to spit you out. The low ground is the middle ground, right? The low ground is the safe ground. The high ground is being hot. But God would rather us be at least hot or cold instead of taking this sort of safe approach. Anyway, we're getting a little strung out here a little bit, but hopefully we've been able to just encourage people to overcome any fear they might have by understanding who God is and who they are in relationship to God, and recognize that, we have all of eternity to live this out. And it doesn't end tomorrow. Even if we die, it doesn't end tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
Well, really good. And that's amazing that in this context of the kingdom that we're called to be part of, where there's a king and there's a country that's growing, that we get called to be part of making it work. And that includes this culture of not safety first, not the safety first. It's courage first. It's like, listen to God, hear what he says. And there's more safety in that courageous spot than if not, that following what God says. So really good, Bruce, totally. Really good today. And so thanks for the insight there. And thanks for joining us today. Kingdomize the podcast. We love it when you join us. You listen, you click on that button and listen to us, and when you share it with others. And we love your feedback, so let us know what you learned today, other thoughts you had today about safety versus risk, or safety with risk, and getting over the fear. Nothing good comes out of fear, so you might as well press into God's character, press into his courage, and then step out and do something good for the kingdom. And so we are here for you. If there's any way we can bless you and help you, that's why we exist at Kingdomize. So, hey, join us again next week for another great part of this series on Kingdom Zeal on Kingdomize the podcast.
Thanks for joining us today on Kingdomize the podcast. Let's keep the discussion going throughout the week on our socials or on our website, kingdomizeglobal.com. Contact us today to see how we can walk together to see more of God's kingdom in your city as it is in heaven.